Yeah. Okay, so we are live. For those listening at home, welcome to the Live from the Sword Coast podcast. My name is Kevin Madison, and I'm not going to be your friendly dungeon master this evening, but well, I guess I will. I'll be your friendly storyteller this evening. And the reason I'm going to be your storyteller this evening is because tonight, for most of our session, me and Jeff, the usual guest of the Wednesday night podcast, will be creating a character for Mage the Ascension 20th anniversary edition. So, but before we dive into the character creation, I wanted to chat with Jeff about what gaming he did over the long weekend and share some of the shit that came in the mail for me. This was a good start to the short week for me. I guess it's not the start. I'm halfway through the fucking week now. But Jeff, how about you? What gaming did you get up to between now and or last session and now?
You know what? The gaming I did was on Super NES. I purchased a Super NES Classic. So I've been playing Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, Super Ghosts and Ghouls, Super Punch-Out, a bunch of traditional old school games.
Very cool. I got did you play any board games or anything over the break?
No, I don't actually think I did. I was with my family at the cabin, so.
Oh, right, you were saying, yeah.
Yeah, they're not the biggest gamers.
Yeah. My folks were in for, so I guess for those listening at home, this past weekend at the time of recording was Canadian Thanksgiving. So we had a long weekend, which was nice. My folks came into town. They drove out from Winnipeg to Calgary. And I didn't get, like, we obviously didn't do any gaming. My parents are not gamers. But after spending, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday quite busy, we actually took Monday to just do nothing. And I got a chance to sit back and play Overwatch again, which I haven't had a chance to do for about a month now. Which is great because the 10th, not Monday, but the day afterwards, they started the Halloween special stuff, which is cool. Excuse me. Have you played Overwatch yet, Jeff?
No, I haven't played much Overwatch at all. No.
Okay, so it's if you don't know, it's a first-person shooter, like online multiplayer thing. There isn't really a PvE, game mode at default, but over Halloween they set up this one that's basically like a zombie thing, where there's like these zombie robots that come in, and you can either have a set 12 stage fight with a series of boss fights, or you can play one where it's just endless waves. Which actually ends up being a lot more difficult to get to. You do have an end point where you get through the first sort of bulk of the game, and then you go into bonus rounds. But it's so fucking hard. But it's cool because it's not like for a game that normally you don't play co-op or you don't play, PvE co-op. It was a really fun. It's a fun change, so I'm enjoying that. But I think I've played enough Overwatch to last me for the next couple of weeks now. So I may jump back in around Christmas, but I always feel guilty when I hop on because it's such a time suck. Excuse me.
You just get playing it for hours and hours.
Yeah, it's one of these games where like the rounds only take between 5 and 15 minutes, so you can burn through a lot of games per hour hour. And they reload so quickly in between. Like there's usually about a 30-second count, like cooldown between when the one game ends and the next one begins, and they do a countdown for it. So it sort of hits that fucking lizard brain competitive, stuff. So I just, just one more game. Just one more game. Then you look at the clock and it's 1 a.m. and you're like, it's a weekday. What am I doing? Oh man. Yeah. So that's been fun. And then I did. Over the break, I got some writing done for this campaign, and I got a chance to sit down and do some more reading for Mage to like familiarize myself with the mechanics of the new edition, because I've read them through briefly, but I've not actually sat down and read this book. Obviously, I have a job, so I can't read this fucking cover to cover in a short period of time. But yeah, so that's been good. Corey actually requested one of the players from our Friday night sessions, Corey asked me to write a Star Trek one-shot for everyone to play, and which is nice because this game just came out, Star Trek Adventures. It's the published by Modiphius Games, which is the same publisher that put out Conan. So it's got the same basic dice mechanic, but they've tweaked the rules to play more, more like a Star Trek TV show or movie. And I think the reason Corey asked for that is because he's currently working on a CG project where he modeled the original Enterprise, but in an updated version from the one from the original series. So, and he's also working on some other models. He wants to, I think it's Balance of Terror is the episode where he's trying to do all the CG shots and redo them. So he's working on a Romulan one too. So I said that I would try and write something that would be include a Constitution class ship because he's got this cool model for it, and I'll include the classic Romulan bird of prey because he's modeling that right now too. And I've got a specifically self-interested version. A reason for that is because I'm kind of hoping he's going to put together a trailer again. Because for our for those listening at home, our one of the players in my Star Wars campaign, he's a professional CG artist, and he put together this amazing trailer of our gaming group's ship. And I think I'm going to have to post that or share that at some point on this channel because it's fucking incredible. But anyway, so I'm hoping that he might do something similar for that. So I've been poking at that, just trying to get myself familiar with the rules, and it's a lot less rules heavy than what Conan was. There's still the same mechanic of like momentum, and you're using D20s to resolve all your tasks, but they've really simplified the stats, the skills, and given it a very Star Trek kind of vein or Star Trek theme to it.
Yeah.
The ship combat, like they've taken the idea from so the version that we've played before, Jeff, was the Icon system. It was the version of Star Trek role playing that was published by Last Unicorn Games. That was the one that had some good rules for teamwork when you're,
yeah, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, so they've actually gone a step further with this one. So it's got some similarities to the Star Wars role playing game by Fantasy Flight, but it's got a very Star Trek feel to it. So, and in the sense that it gives command more things to do. In the Fantasy Flight version of Star Wars, it's a great set of rules, but there isn't really a role for a commander. There's not really a lot of great beneficial stuff. Sorry, long day that they can do. But this does have that. So you've got like whether you're commander or helmsman or science officer or whatever, you're going to have something to do at the helm. So I'm obviously going to have you guys fighting a Romulan bird of prey at least one at some point in this adventure. So so that was cool. Now the things that actually showed up in the mail. One thing was something I actually can't remember why I had ordered it in the first place. It was a game that I saw reviewed quite well on Drive-Thru RPG called Blood and Bone. This is it here.
Oh, yeah.
I heard it. So the way I heard it, and once I actually started looking through it, I remember why. The game was supposed to be, it's in the same way that like D&D is inspired or has a starting point of Tolkien's work to make the what do you call it? To make like the tropes that make up the game. This uses Game of Thrones or the Song of Ice and Fire as a starting point. So there are no demi-humans, there's no high magic and whatnot, but there's some fairly low magic in it. It's also quite lethal, but the interesting thing with it is there's no levels in it per se, but they've incorporated a different thing. Like you pick traits, which are kind of like feats, like the 5th edition D&D feats, where it gives you a couple of things. And then as you get more traits, you will be going up effectively in level. And then there are certain things that are dictated by how many traits you have. But the thing that's the most interesting is, so combat in it is basically, so you will be doing either when the damage you do to your opponents is dictated by how well you roll, and that's really it. So like I found it confusing at first because the way that, like, they've got a list of weapons in this, right? So here's the list of weapons in there. Let me get out of the way of the mic. You'll notice, though, that there is no fucking damage. There's no damage listed there whatsoever. Weapons are dictated by the abilities you have, not by just by virtue of what the weapons are. So a knife could, in theory, do as much damage as what a greatsword or whatever else, which I guess is kind of accurate. It's because you're not testing how damaging these things are against a stationary object or against just a piece of wood or whatever. Like, it's things that are used in the dynamic ebb and flow of combat. And the way that it works is you either, on each attack, you'll either do, if you do, assuming you hit and you injure the person, you'll do a minor wound, which counts as half of a wound, or a major wound, which causes 2. Characters only really have like around between 3 and 6 or 7 wounds that they can actually take. Once you take that amount, or once it's exceeded, you die. Full stop.
Right.
And wounds, absent any kind of magic stuff, wounds take forever to heal. So it's a really interesting. It's a neat game. Like GURPS, I've got other games I've run and played before that are can be quite lethal. But it's interesting in this one that they've set it up that way. They have optional rules in it to play. What's they call saga play. So you get depending on how many traits your character has, you'll get a buffer of endurance, and then basically endurance regenerates each day, and you can use that to suck up wounds you take. But the character creation I thought you would find interesting, because the character creation in this is really the mechanics of it are quite minimal, but the story element is really strong. So like when you make a character, once you all agree on a kind of like what the game's going to be about, you pick beliefs, 3 beliefs. One of them is a world belief, like what you believe about the world as a whole. For instance, one character they give, House Thorn, is the only power holding order in Eastern Tharn, and if it falls, many Escarn will suffer. For the sake of my people, I will use my might to defeat the house's enemies wherever I find. So kind of like 13th Age, it's a way of the player contributing something to what's going to be the campaign. So you set a world belief, then you set an other belief about one of the other characters, similar to what we've done in our D&D campaign right now, and in I guess we haven't ever played Cypher System as written, but that's what the Cypher System does too. So that would be like you add a story element about one of the other players, like one of the other characters, I should say. One of the other characters' fathers was acted as a brother, and you owe him your life or whatever, and then you have one about yourself. So those 3 things, and you pick what's called a complication, which can be like you're mute, you're a fanatic, you're gruff, you're a dwarf, you're cruel, you're heroic. And then every time you play up one of those things, you get this resource that will allow you to get advantage on rolls. So it's like, what do you call it? Like just like in D&D, where you roll 2d20. Skills in this are basically scaled in terms of other dice. So if you got 1 rank, you're going to roll 1d4 and add that to a d20 roll, and then that goes up for each stage up to I think it's 6, which is a d12. So when you're making a skill check, you're going to add your attribute, you're going to add a d20 roll, and then whatever your skill dice is, which is kind of neat. I mean, it's a different way. It does make for a little bit of swinginess, I think, at higher levels, because you're going to get, I think, you will get a higher number more often on a d4. Than you would on a d12.
Right.
No, that's not true. You would get the max, I guess, on more often on a d4 than you would on a d12. But yeah. So what you do is you set one of there's 4 attributes. You set those. You pick your beliefs. You pick your complication. You spend I think it's 6 points on skills, and then you pick these traits. There's a pretty big list. Like this is the list of traits. You can see it's a really small book, right? Like it's a tiny thing. So there's about 6 pages of traits in here. And like as an example of what the traits can do, like if you're a duelist, you get 2 benefits. One of them is When you'd make a fighting skill check with advantage, roll 3d20 instead of 2 and take the highest of the 3. So you're like an expert swordsman. And then the other benefit is if you are adjacent to only one other character, gain +2 chance of major wounds with fighting skill checks. Major wounds are the ones that do 2. Oh, okay, yeah, no problem. Do you need to restart now?
Well, I think it'll make it so that I don't keep missing what you're saying.
Oh, sure, yeah. Why don't you go ahead and restart, and I'll just occupy myself with some coffee.
You can tell everybody.
So I guess for those, while we're waiting for Jeff to get back, so Blood and Bone is published by, I think it's Arcane Press, maybe? What does it say here? Arcana Games, published last year. The designer is Eugene Fasano. So yeah, I mean, it's the game itself, or the book itself, is divided into half of it. I haven't read the whole thing through yet, and I have not had an opportunity to run it. And I really do prefer to run a game before I review it, because I don't feel that there are a lot of things. Well, I mean, I've said this on the channel before, but the main reason is because games are meant to be played. So to judge the game itself, I want to see what it's like in actual play, because there's been many times in the course of my gaming career where I've read a game and expected it to play like X, and then I actually run it and it plays like Y, which sometimes is positive and sometimes is negative. So I really do want to give this a try at some point in the near future. And it seems very, very easy to get through, but it's a very, very cool, dark, I guess, maybe not dark. I mean, dark fantasy in a sense that is low magic, with a pretty good amount of customization for your characters in terms of the traits that you can purchase. It makes no bones about that, about the fact that combat plays a big role in this. Combat is a big deal in Game of Thrones, and quite lethal in Westeros, and it really is taking that as its kind of its thematic walking orders. One other thing I'll mention too is I mentioned to Jeff that there was a saga system. What that option allows you to do is to create 3 characters. Every player creates 3 characters, one of which is features 10 traits, and the default starting character has, I believe, 3. So you create 1 character with 10 traits, 1 with 5, and then 1 with, I believe, 1. And what that does is it sets up a primary character, a secondary, primary antagonist, primary protagonist, I guess, primary character, secondary character, and tertiary character. Hey, I'm just explaining some, what do you call it? Some of the specifics of the saga system for this.
Oh, cool. Yeah, as soon as I went to restart my computer, it's like Windows update. Windows wants, it's like update and restart or update and shut down. It's like, fuck you, Windows.
Yeah.
Like, obviously it was breaking my whole system because I'm like, you're not restarted yet.
I used to have that problem on one of my computers where it would routinely, whenever we were gaming or when we were on Skype trying to game, it would decide that it wanted to update my everything. So, so anyway, the thing I was just saying is that so because combat, it can be, well, I mean, it is really quite lethal, but the game is really about combat. One of the ways that they suggest that you mitigate that is by creating 3 characters for each character. You create a primary character, a secondary character, and a tertiary character. And the way that it works in terms of like the power levels, at default, your characters, I believe, start with 3 traits to give you a sense of what a starting character is supposed to be like. But for that type of campaign, you start with the primary character gets 10, secondary character gets 5, tertiary character gets, I believe, 1. And then you choose in each chapter, they call each adventure a chapter in this because it's designed to be part of an ongoing saga. It's very clear, they say expressly that there's not supposed to be an end for this game. So it's not like some other games where they're trying to create more, finite kind of like beginning and end points for campaigns. But what the idea is that if your primary character dies, then your secondary character gets promoted to the primary, the tertiary becomes the secondary, and then you come up with a new tertiary. The secondary character dies, the tertiary character becomes your secondary, and so forth. And then, yeah. So it provides an interesting way of having some continuity with the characters, or with I guess the campaign in general, but not having to treat everything with kid gloves.
That sounds cool. I mean, if they're saying it's based on Game of Thrones, my immediate thought is that house to play and create family members from that house. You know, maybe even creating like 8 of them or something, and then choosing from those 8 who's your primary, who's your secondary, and who's your tertiary. Just so that there's already like talk of your cousin or whatever, if all of a sudden they do become your secondary character or whatever, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's neat because I think that it also gives you a chance to, as a player, to create a bunch of you know, a bunch of different characters, to try a bunch of different things. And then, like, if you decide that in between sessions, like, you know what, I think I'd like to give my, you know, the characters who can cast, excuse me, spells in this are called blooded. And they don't really cast spells. They just have the talents give you a very specific ability, but they're pretty neat. Like, you know, healing or like raising the dead. They've got some the way magic or raising dead works in this is you create one of 2 different kinds of undead. There's a thrall, which is basically like a mindless, you know, thing that just follows instructions but has limited autonomy and whatnot. Or you can create risen, which are more expressly magical, you know, and more they have more brain power to them than what the thralls do. The only actual nation I read anything about was this one called Tarn, and that's because of this badass picture of this dude and his zombie. So I wanted to know what the deal was there. And what it is I guess Tarn has traditionally made use of undead, like they work the fields. They're effectively like a slave underclass but they're undead. The downside being is that if you the risen, they've got some kind of infectious ability, so they scratch you or bite you or kill you or whatever, and where you die because of that, you become a risen as well. So the potential of a zombie plague is very real there. So I don't know. There's not really there's some other like magical creatures, but like they're not D&D magical where they've got weird abilities or whatever else. It's more like, you know, what do you call it? Cryptozoic fauna. You know, like there's basilisks, which are kind of like dragons. They do go pretty far to try and not just rip off everything about Game of Thrones, but just like Forgotten Realms is a very modified gamey version of Middle Earth. This does feel like a modified gamey version of Westeros as well.
Right.
But yeah, so it's interesting. Like, I mean, I haven't from what I've seen so far, it's interested me enough to keep it on the high enough in my stack to keep me thinking about what I would, you know, what I'd like to try with it.
We're already playing 2 games. I don't think we should start a third.
No, this is going to be like waiting in the wings. And it's the nice thing about it too is it's simple enough that as long as I mean, I could really pick up and run this thing within half an hour. You know, I mean, like, I'm not going to have the full setting information and whatever else, but I mean, the setting information is brief enough that I could spend 15 minutes going through and have a really good sense of what one of the nations is like, and then we can go. You know, so this is going to be a great game to sit in the background for when we, you know, have a night to kill or whatever. The final thing that showed up in the mail today I was quite pleased with is Conan.
Oh, nice.
Yes, it finally showed up, and it is gorgeous. The only thing that I regret is having only ordered one of the supplements. I've got the Book of Skelos from it, and I think I'm going to have to go back to the website and order the rest of the books that are out, because Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Mercenary, and Conan I don't know what the other one was. Barbarian, Mercenary, and Pirate, I think, are out. No, that's not right. Anyway, there's three of the books are out so far. Oh, the Thief, Conan the Thief. 3 of them are out so far, and I have PDF copies of them because I backed the Kickstarter. But That's really cool. It reminded me how much I enjoyed
It's like
running
a great game system to play a bunch of pirates in.
Heck yeah. And each of the books too, like this is what makes me excited for the Star Trek line as well, is because every one of the books that have come out for Conan are really fucking cool. Like just full of great setting information, great optional rules, expanding the existing options, and as well as introducing new ones.
Man, gamers have never had it so good.
Really, like, and Modiphius is doing incredible. Knock wood. I mean, it seems to be doing incredibly well because they successfully kickstarted Conan, which was really quite successful. I don't think they kickstarted, but they just published Star Trek Adventures, which seems to be doing incredibly well because they've got like 3. Maybe they did kickstart it because I did get a limited edition of it, but there's already like 2 supplements out for it, and they've got a whole slew of them that are listed, and they're backing a bunch of other, like there's a new Kickstarter for another game that was I noticed today. I did like a whole different game line too. So they have yet to come out with the Infinity game as well too, which was I think the Kickstarter just closed. No, Kickstarter closed a while ago, but they're just releasing the books now. I saw that I got a PDF copy, but I haven't read it yet. So they've got that's a big fucking line of different games, or a variety of lines. They have a John Carter game coming out sometime soon too.
They have a Fallout game.
Yeah, the Fallout Tactics thing. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Mm.
Yeah, they have a lot of games. Wow.
Yeah, they've done. And I mean, their first thing that I was aware of actually was the Acton Cthulhu. It's this cool, like, let me show you. It's a line of books that basically take the idea of Call of Cthulhu, a horror game, and give it a little bit more of a pulpy vibe in the Second World War. So this was the first. They kickstarted this. They did a whole line of books. And they're amazing. They also, they also did some really interesting books that were crossovers with other games. So, like, there's a game called Godlike that's set in World War II, and what they did is they published, Acton Cthulhu, Godlike one. So you could take those ideas and incorporate them into your Acton Cthulhu campaign. They did one for, what was it? There's a game called Dust, which is another World War II game. Like there's I think 3 or 4 different other games that they had. So I guess with the Godlike thing too. If you want to play superheroes, right? Like a superhero horror thing set in World War II, you've got the supplement ready to go for that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, but anyway, that's the kind of success they've seen with it. But all right, so I think that's the extent of the gaming shit I want to talk about. I picked up some more Ars Magica books on the weekend too, but then I got distracted by the last thing I wanted to mention too is the 5 Rings stuff. So I had a chance to read through about half of the rules and then poke through some of the rest. And it looks really like it's going to be the strongest version of the role-playing game that they've published so far. But at the end of the day, it's still all about, and I don't mean this isn't a fault of it. This is just what the game's about. The game's about samurai drama, right? Like that's what you're playing that game for, and that's not a bad thing. But I think that when I was more into that world, like more into Rokugan and playing up that stuff, this would have been a more interesting release for me, because while it's inventive and it does feel like going back home again with a lot of those, a lot of the characters and clans and whatever else too. And I don't doubt that the supplements are going to be amazing because Fantasy Flight puts out great shit, and I'm gonna pick it up. It doesn't have me as excited as I thought I was going to be initially.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know. I'm not sure I would get so into that. It's too political for me, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like a little. I mean, you can. When we played it before, we did try to stay a little bit away from that. Like if we remember correct, we were playing at the walls. What are the walls called again?
The Caillou Wall.
Yeah, where like all the
Shadowlands.
All the monsters are like in the Crablands.
Yeah, I mean the campaign that we ran for everybody, or I ran for everyone, was set like, you know, in the kind of hinterlands border provinces between the Phoenix lands and the Lion lands. And yeah, I mean, I didn't really play up the whole court stuff because you guys didn't have court characters, you know. And I once again ignored the recommendation. I guess that's really one of the earliest examples of when a game tells you, hey, this is how you can set up an easy campaign for yourself. And I go, no, I can do it myself. And then it causes problems, you know, almost immediately because there's no cohesive reason to keep everyone together. Because you had there was a scorpion who kept trying to do scorpion shit, and there was a crab who had really no reason to be there, and there was a dragon guy who was on a Musha Shugayo, you know, Warrior's Pilgrimage thing. Yeah, it was bizarre. There was a Phoenix Magistrate. I think that's what James's character was. He was a duelist.
Yeah, we were just like, it's hilarious because everyone just played the clan they wanted to play. And
yeah. And like if I just set them up as Emerald Magistrates like the fucking book recommended, there would have been no issue because like there's the reason why you guys are all together. But nope. Don't try and tell me anything.
Yeah.
So, oh man. But that's actually
we were kind of rookies at building parties back then too. Like
totally. Yeah, and I mean, you know, I'm born, you know, died in the wool fucking contrarian. So I mean, you tell me X, I'll tell you Y. So
right, you should do it this way. No.
Yeah, no, I know what I'm doing. I clearly don't. Okay, cool. So that was the last thing I wanted to mention is that I did actually look through the materials, and it's I still might print a copy off just to go through it in more detail, but like it's a thick fucking game too. Like there are subsystems for pretty much everything. And it requires a lot of interpretation, but it seems to refer, like you can improv the results just like you can in Star Wars, but they do seem to have a lot of recommended tables, which strikes me as kind of cumbersome for a new game. Like you don't want to be spending all your time going back and referring to rules, right? Or like to tables to figure out what you're doing with stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I hope that it well, I mean, I'm gonna first off, I want to buy a copy, of course, when it comes out because I love the setting enough to support a game line like that. And I'm hoping that it will be successful enough on its release to be able to support that. But I wonder where they think that the fan base is going to come from for this, whether it's existing Five Rings players or whether it's going to be people playing one of their Star Wars role-playing games, because I don't think they're publishing any other role-playing games right now. They're publishing a bunch of board games, and they are publishing the card game for Legend of the Five Rings. But you know, there's not really other games that they could cross over from anymore because they stopped supporting.
I mean, is there just a dearth of like samurai-based games, and so people who want to play in that world, you know, you're going to pick it up, I guess.
Yeah, like I mean, the only other, well, actually, I shouldn't say the only. There's two other really samurai themed games, like setting aside, you know, games that are you know, universal games that can be played in a samurai setting like the Hero System or GURPS. The two games I'm thinking of are, there was a game called Sengoku that was released in the 90s that was based on the wasn't the Hero System, it was the shit, what do they call it? It was this halfway bastard system between Hero System and Artel Saurian's system that they used for Cyberpunk. Artel Saurian was the publisher of Cyberpunk, which was like sort of the Shadowrun without the magic shit in it. And I can't remember what the name was. It was one of the first like mashup systems, and it was just, it could be a mess, but yeah. But anyway, that was it had some really great setting material for that, and you could play a, you know, whatever type of samurai game, you wanted high magic, low magic, whatever, high action, low action. And then the other one is which is the granddaddy of these games, is Bushido. Bushido was a game that was published in the 80s, and Legend of the Five Rings, the role-playing game, the first edition at least, stole a ton of fucking things almost directly from Bushido. I didn't realize it at the time because I got into Bushido after I had started running Five Rings. But you remember the mass combat table from Five Rings?
Not exactly, no.
It was a thing where if there was mass combat, you would pick sort of what level of engagement you were in, and then you would roll, and it would tell you sort of what your opportunity was. You know, you could.
Oh yeah, okay, I do remember that. Yeah.
Stolen whole cloth from Bushido. The rules for honor and whatnot are almost verbatim stolen from Bushido as well. So, and then Bushido's got, because it's it's a creation of the 80s. It's just really fucking complicated, and I'm not even sure if it's in print right now. I don't know if there was some what do you call it, nostalgia, old school gaming company that's pumping it out again now. But it was fucking complex as hell. I mean, I never really understood how to actually play the game, and I was reading it as an adult. So it wasn't like I was a kid who didn't know. So yes, I mean, you're maybe right. It may be the only, or at least the most prominent sort of fantasy, Japan game that's going to be out there. So, and I don't doubt
yeah,
I don't doubt that the game will be beautiful as well too, because some of the art on the dice roller, they give you an option to change your wallpaper, and you can change it to some of the different clan champions, and they have new pictures of of many of the classic, Scorpion Clan coup era characters. So Hida Kasada could be the daimyo of the Crab Clan, could be one of your characters. Togashi Hattori, who was the original Togashi, but the daimyo of the Dragon Clan. Yeah, so it's cool. And I of course immediately set my wallpaper to Bayushi Shoju, who is the daimyo of the Scorpion Clan at the time of the clan coup. Yeah, I'm not crazy about the picture of him, only because I like the other pictures. He's such a badass character that they could have done it better justice, but all the other ones look really good. So anyway, that is, yeah, it's been a eventful week for gaming for me. So I wanted to chat about some of that shit with you, and I want to tell you about Blood and Bone too, because I thought it was neat. It's not going to rock my world or change the way I run games or any shit like that, but it seems like a fun kind of pick up and play kind of thing.
I do like their solution to doing heavy lethality in the game. And also, if you take a major wound to your main character, you can just play with your other two characters for a bit and say that your character's healing or whatever, and actually spend the time to have them rest or heal up. And in fact, really, there's almost nothing stopping you from saying, my character's become so injured, what if I just set him as my tertiary character and move my other two characters up a step and just play him as if he's bedridden, or play some of the stuff that's happening around the house or around the whatever, but not have him be a combat character anymore.
Well, as there's specific benefits you get from each chapter you complete. So in theory, if you devoted more attention to your supporting characters, your secondary and your tertiary character, you would just by virtue of doing that get them more powerful, right? They'd get closer to being what your primary character is. So
right.
One thing I would say is that this is not a game for first timers. As simplified as it is, I think there are a lot of things that I assume that there are gaps, just like old school games, there are gaps in the rules. Healing is really not clear as to how long. There's lots of magic abilities and herbs and stuff that you can an apothecary can collect and whatnot that will modify your healing, and they give specific rules there. But there actually isn't any rules for natural healing. It's sort of just whatever the DM wants it to be, which is you know, in a modern game design or a modern game environment, that does seem a little loosey goosey and maybe a bit of an oversight. Even with some other, and like there's some stuff like they added in the DM section of Blood and Bone. They added in some other just kind of like they're like random ideas where like give you rules for like hostile environments and rules for I think it's poison as well, but not really any idea or direction as to how to actually implement that stuff. So they're like, you know, well, if you're exposed to extreme temperature, here's what you do. If you're exposed to frigid water, here's what you do. And the way that they set it up is very much the way that they did in like the Wilderness Survival Guide from AD&D and stuff like that. Well, or more recently, I guess Pathfinder, where they'll tell you, you know, you got to make a check every hour to do that stuff. The thing is, for a game that is structured so, you know, in chapters like an idea of a narrative kind of thing, that seems fairly rigidly mechanistic because there's not really a lot of story that's going to come from that shit. I guess you could if you set up the game a different way, but I mean, like if your story takes it so that your character is stuck in, you know, the frozen north, like right, without proper protection, and the nearest thing is like, you know, 6 miles away or like whatever, like say it's a day's travel or 2 days travel, your character's probably going to die, you know, unless there's some other intervening factor there, just by virtue of the way the rules were written. Because you take a wound for every, you make a strength check against a CR10, which is pretty low. But I mean, if remember that you've got an average of 0, and there's no skill that plays into that. So you got 50% chance for the average person to gain 1 wound in inhospitably cold or inhospitably hot weather. 24 hours of traveling that way, you're dead. Like the odds are just not going to work out for you.
No, that's terrible RNG balancing.
Yeah, so it seems like there was like they wanted to get the book out. I understand it was Kickstarted as well, so they had some kind of half-baked rules without any guiding structure for it, and we're like, well, just here, you know. I'm interested. There's apparently an adventure for it, and I'd be interested to see what they think, like what the designers think you do with this game. Yeah, they also have a list of NPCs. There's a good chunk of NPCs and some beasts and stuff in it as well, which is helpful for the DM because there's tons of things you can plug and play. The downside is that all the special abilities from each of the NPCs comes from the traits, and the biggest annoyance from this game is that, so they list, I mentioned there's like, you know, 6 pages of traits in it, right? Which is cool, tons of options. They're not in alphabetical order. They're all over the fucking place. Like from reading through it, it seems like they're grouped thematically, but they've done nothing with the layout to suggest how that's working. Like, you know, which one is a prerequisite and which ones are you know, subsequent abilities you can or traits you can take. So fortunately, it's not that big, and I do have a PDF of this as well, so it's easy to search. But I mean, it does mean that, you know, there's 7 pages for you to page through to try and find certain things, and the NPCs. All they do is, let me show you here. They just list a list of their abilities, so, or of their traits rather, and then they leave it to you to look up. So like, here is a Escarn Druid. Okay, Escarn Druid has these traits right here. So you got to go and look up.
Goodness, there's like 10 of them.
Yeah, so you got to go and look up what those things are, and they're not alphabetical. So bit of a pain in the ass there, but I mean, whatever. Like once you there's a few enough of these things that once you become familiar with the game, I imagine it's an easy thing. But and they cram a shit ton of stuff into a fairly small package. So what it
feels like they were missing an editor or something, Kev.
Yeah, I think that the guy, like, this is a one-man show. The art is provided by other people, but
one person did it all himself.
Lead designer, rules development, writing, and he's one of the 2 editors listed. But you know what? Like, I mean, if this is the product of one guy's vision and supported by a handful of Kickstarters, like, this is better and a more complete game than what a lot of old school games are. You know, I don't mean the OSR, like old school Renaissance kind of games, but I mean like games that were published back in the day. There was a game that I used to have called Justifiers, which is a little like indie, you know, kind of game. And I loved it because of the art in it. It was about, you were like, you played a team of characters who were sent through this like portal that would take you to a new world, and then you had to try and colonize it. But you were playing characters who were mutant animals. So like you were assets of a corporation that were going to be like trailblazers for a thing. Yeah, it's what a fucked idea. Like it's totally a teenage that I really dug it, but the art was amazing in it. So it really, you know, it was enough, interested me enough, but that game did not work. Like it was completely unplayable. This, by all, I mean, there's some shortcomings, but this seems playable.
Right.
You know. But yeah, and I think that the thing that's interesting about it is that it's the kind of game where you could sit down and create a really interesting, you know, you could set up an interesting world and setting in very short order. You know, take an evening, talk to your players. In the course of setting out the beliefs, you'd come up with what you're going to play and what the connections are and what the meaningful, you know, and interesting, you know, drawbacks for each of your characters as well too. And I think that players playing in this, you know, oh geez, one last thing I wanted to mention too that I love is the assumptions, right? So like one of the assumptions they make is that there is no good and evil. Conflicts are driven by human desires and morality is often ambiguous. That's a huge fucking thing. That's a big thing they draw from Game of Thrones. There's not, you know, a good guy on a, you know, paladin on a horse and a bad guy or whatever else. There are just people who want shit, just like the real world. Combat is deadly. All violence is threatening and poses serious chance of grave injury. Vivid descriptions of pain and wounds can complement the mechanics. The wilds are vast and frightening. The setting is a world in a dark age. Though there are dense cities, much of the world is unexplored and untamed. There's no magic. Gods are as silent and absent as in our world. Blood, the hereditary power over life and death, is seen as a natural law of the world. And finally, blood is terrifying. Blood is what they call magic. The effect of blooded destruction, or a grisly sight to behold, and risen, the undead, are even more horrifying still. So that's, you can, I think, knowing my sensibilities in a game, you can understand why that really appeals to me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I love like there's just next to nothing to learn. There's like 20 or 30 pages worth of setting material, so like you could blow through that in an hour or two, and have a really good idea of what the world is, and then you can just make up whatever you want with it. So right. I like that a lot because it's less homework for me, you know. So. Yeah. So anyway, that's the state of gaming around these parts. What was I going to say? Yeah. So now let's turn our minds to Mage. So I'm going to open up. I'm going to open up Roll20 on my my laptop just because I don't want my current computer to slow down too much. Okay, what's going on here? There we go. Apparently, it has been a while since I've opened up. Fuck right off. Because we started making your character in Roll20. So have you given any more thought to your dude?
Yeah, a little bit. I believe we were on picking the what's it called? The attribute. Let's see if I can actually scroll this thing.
Yeah, I think you're at the point where you're going to start.
Is it really called traits? No. Archetype or nature and demeanor, I believe, is where we were.
Right. Okay, that's where we ran into some issues. Well, I'm trying to
my internet was totally destroyed. I have to call Bell to come fix it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Hold on. I'm trying to I've got these fucking notifications that are coming up. There we go. Let's figure out how to crash them. I could not get rid of my YouTube notifications, which drive me nuts right now. So why don't do you recall much about what we had set for the campaign?
It's set in Calgary.
Yep.
We talked about my character running the game store.
Yeah, oh yes, we were talking about Sentry Box. That's right.
Yeah, and you were suggesting that it could be Sentry Box, and I said that's a great idea.
Okay. So
we had decided that he would be a member of the Society of Ether.
Yes. Yep.
And the concept was sort of pop culture inventor.
Yep.
And I chose dynamic for his essence.
Right. And what we were talking about before we took our before the technocracy started interfering with us was your what do you call it? You had an idea that your character had sort of inherited the store from his parents, and then what was originally a kind of like a grocery shop or whatever else gradually became, you know, overtaken by gaming stuff and pop culture stuff and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
And what I was saying when we lost the connection was that, like, I'm fine with that. Like, we don't have to hew to what, you know, reality is in terms of like what the Sentry Box was like or whatever. Right.
Right. Like, how its actual origins.
Absolutely. Like, it's the game. So what I want to do for these real world games is to adopt like a, you know, Hollywood movie approach where we're just using a setting, or we're using a set to act as a stand-in for, or location to stand in for something else, right? And I was saying about I did my grad degree in UBC, and it has really ruined me for most CW shows because they use so much of that fucking campus to stand in for, like, you know, LexCorp or, you know, Star City or whatever, because it's all filmed there.
Yeah.
So give me a second. I'm just trying to open up. Where's your documents? No, downloads. Books downloads. Yes, I'm opening a PDF copy of Mage as well. Okay, so let's talk about your guys. Yeah, nature and demeanor. So these are, whoopsies. On nature and demeanor are on pages. Where are you? 339. No, that's not right. I don't think those are the descriptions.
271?
271?
I'm sort of in the middle of it right now.
Yes, okay, right, yeah. So 267 is the starting point for that. So yeah, remember that your nature is how you actually are, like how you would regain willpower, and your demeanor is how you present yourself to other players, or to other people. So if you, what you talked about your character being, we set his essence as dynamic. And how do you see his avatar interacting with him? Like, does he have? Is it voices he hears, or is it a point of you know, just it's just a flash of inspiration he has?
Yeah, I think what I was saying last time was there like flashes of insight where he'll, you know, remember a scene in a movie or a few panels of a comic book, or, you know, an episode of a TV show, or, you know, a toy or a commercial, something that will be the link for his inspiration.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. Okay, so with that in mind, how do you see his nature? What's he really like? There are additional ones. Did I send you the Book of Secrets as well? You know what? Actually, we don't need to expand that. I don't. One of the things that with certain games, like Pathfinder. Pathfinder is a great fucking game, but like the choice, the number of options just leads to, you know, choice paralysis. If you look behind here, so from here, that shelf right there, all the way to the end, that's all Pathfinder shit.
Wow.
Like, only the first two boxes there are rule books. But then, and the last one is all adventures. But like, that's how much material there is for the game. And in fairness, like, most of that second box is all DM stuff, like monsters or, you know, whatever. But enough of it, even that first one, like that's a huge amount of fucking stuff to.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
I think that hacker maybe makes the most sense.
Hacker, okay. Let's say here. So hacker, every system is a locked vault, and you've got the keys. If you don't have ones that work, you'll make new ones. That's half the fun of life, after all. Puzzles excite you. Limits just piss you off, especially given the sheer amount of abuse that's built into any system. The world needs folks like you to tear down impediments and set reality free. Yep, that sounds right. So it says that imagination is your greatest strength. You see things not as they are, but as they could be once you get done with them. So that fits with the idea of the like a creator or crafter, like the Sons of Ether. You regain willpower when you detect a flaw in some important structure, system, or device, or else when you puzzle out a way to improve something that was supposedly designed well to begin with. That's cool. Okay, cool. So go ahead and add your nature as hacker. And then what is your demeanor? Is it the same, or is it people see him as something?
This would be like how others see you.
Yeah, or how he presents himself to others. Because one is, the latter is more focused on your character.
Right. I'm just wondering if there's one that's more... I'm wondering if his demeanor, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but if I don't want him to be the same, maybe he's seen by others as a bit of a kid still.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just, you know, because he's running this store that, like, a lot of adults would see as, like, sort of oh, he never grew up, you know, he's still playing games, he's still watches cartoons, you know, just like...
Yeah. Yeah,
and maybe, you know, maybe he doesn't take the best care of himself. Like, maybe he's, you know, not well kept kind of person. He's not, you know, dressing in nice suits or.
Yeah, the kind of guy who, you know, at the end of the day, he's got a friend who, you know, will bring him dinner because they'll know he'll forget to make it for himself.
Right, like he just basically, like, eventually someone comes by the store and someone will have brought him dinner, or, you know.
Yeah.
He'll be playing games and someone will suggest they should order food and he'll just get in on it, kind of thing.
Excuse me, my goodness. Yeah, that absolutely fits. Yep. Okay. Cool. So go ahead and add that as your demeanor. Okay. So let's talk now about your abilities and your attributes. So the attributes are, of course, your stats. It's your raw abilities, your raw physical capability, not abilities, but your capabilities. The abilities are your things you've learned, either talents, skills, or knowledges. Talents, basically those are organized by grouping by how much study is required to obtain them. Right? Talents are supposed to be less, more inborn, more natural kind of knacks, whereas knowledges are things that you have to actually study. Like, you can't just by virtue of luck be good at history, right? Whereas someone could be quite alert.
Right.
So, you know, no one's born a natural historian, right? So whereas, you know, someone could be a natural athlete. There's obviously levels of training and whatever else that go into that as well, but it's just one of them is an absolute bar to entry, and one of them is something that anybody can do, just with varying degrees of success.
Yeah. So now, do you use the same pool of points to assign to all of these things?
No, what you do is, we'll start with your attributes, is you're going to assign one as a primary, one as secondary, and one as tertiary. And then you will get a number of dots to fill in depending on what you've been assigned. So the way that I tend to make characters, and I think this is the way that most people do, is I'll start by adding the tertiary amount to all 3, and then I'll see what the next thing I want to add on. And then I'll pick 2 of them, and I'll add the secondary level of points to them, and then that will, at the end, I will look and see what other one needs a couple extra points. So that way I can, rather than picking them ahead of time, spending the points, and then realizing afterwards you want to switch shit around. So
wait, so then that means that, like, in 6 abilities, you're, like, below average?
No, let's just go through it, and I'll show you what I mean. So for your attributes, what you're going to do is you're going to pick one of your one is going to be so you'll pick physical, social, or mental as your primary, and then another one is your secondary, and another one is your tertiary. Your tertiary one is going to gain 3 points that you can add to the one that you start with, and you can add all 3 points to one of them or spread them around or whatever. The secondary one's going to get 5 points, and the primary one is going to get 7 points. So the way I do it is I start.
Okay, as a group of 3.
Yeah, so I spend 3 on all of them, and then I figure out what needs more, and then I pick 2 of those, and then I add 2 more points to bring it up to 5, and then I see what needs more, and then I add 2 more points to bring it up to 7 to one of them. And that's how I go from, assigning my primary, secondary, tertiary ones.
Right.
Okay. So go ahead and spend the points. Just you click on it, left click on the dot to add the points, and then we'll see how the characters turn out. Maybe you can, as you're doing that too, narrate through sort of what your thought is. I guess, like, do you have any inklings at first as to which, of the physical, social, or mental is going to be his most important?
Yeah, I think I can already see that he's probably going to be physical will be tertiary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll probably, like, just balance his 3 points.
Okay.
Like, so that he's not, frail or, like, can't hold on to things, like. So I'll put 3 points there and turn him into an average person. Like, he's not going to the gym. He's not an athlete. His stamina is just average, right? He's not on the tread climber every day or anything like that.
Okay.
And then I'm thinking that social will be his secondary.
Okay.
So let's see here. So that means that there's 5 points to spend there.
Yep.
So, wait, oh. So that's charisma, manipulation.
Manipulation is convincing, is the ability that's used to make people do things that you want them to do.
Charisma is people like you, and appearance is just how you look.
Yeah.
So I think his appearance will just be average.
Okay.
He's not a overly attractive person. And I don't think that I would say. I think a good charisma. Well, I guess if I make his charisma good, that would make his manipulation good.
Yep.
Basically. Or I can leave one of them average and make the other exceptional. I think if he's running a business, he's got to have kind of a mix of the two.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that makes sense for him to be 3 charisma and 3 manipulation, which is the good setting. And then average appearance.
Okay.
And then, so then there's 7 points in mental.
There are 7 points yet to go to mental.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm just going to set them all to at least good. Then let's see.
So while you're doing that, I'm trying to find the rules for specialties. You can pick specialties, and I believe that, geez, I can't find the damn rules for it. me look at task resolution while you're doing that. Maybe that will give me some insight. Dramatic systems. There we go.
If anything, I think his perception would be lower.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, see, as a game player, this is one of these tough ones. As a game player, I know it's not a good idea to set your perception, low.
Yeah.
But I think of the way the character is, it makes the most sense.
Yeah, I mean, he strikes me as sort of a distracted genius kind of character, the way that you described him.
Right. So then that would mean, wait, 1, 2, 3. Oh, so then I could say, rather than making him outstanding in either intelligence or wits, I could just make him exceptional at both.
Yeah.
And also, wits seems like wits is like quick thinking, right?
Wits is, yes, that's right. Like your intelligence is
that's to be pretty high if he's sort of a like on his feet inventor.
Yeah. Wits is mechanically. Wits is what you use for initiative, incidentally.
Yeah.
I believe I should say one version of the rules had that. I should actually, I don't know in the 20th.
I also like to think of wits as the kind of thing that someone who's really good at video games would be using.
Yep. Yeah.
Or again, someone who is a improvising inventor kind of character.
Okay, so if you have a rating of 4 or higher in a given trait, you can select a specialty for the trait in question. On rolls that determine the success of an activity related to that trait specialty, the player counts every 10 rolled as 2 successes, not 1.
Okay.
I knew that was the thing. So what that means is for your intelligence and your wits, if you turn to page 275, they'll show what the suggested specialties are there.
Right. So, okay. So for intelligence, it's book learning, deep thoughts, bright, creative, or keen-edged mind.
Yeah, and then if we feel that descriptor would apply to a test, that means your 10s count as 2 successes.
Oh, I see. So they're just descriptors.
Yeah, just descriptors. So like, let's say that you are making an intelligence check. You're making an intelligence, let's say, investigation check to give a really good search for a room. If that's what the task is, book learning probably wouldn't apply there. But if the investigation was to go through reams of books to find an obscure reference, or go through a bunch of materials to find the shipping invoice for something, book learning may apply there.
Right. I think creative makes the most sense.
Creative, cool. Okay, so go ahead and add in the box on the right of intelligence there. Go ahead and add creative. And then for wits, what do you think there?
It's combat reflexes, street survivor, cunning, feral, or fox-witted. Fox-witted is the one that I can't think of how to use it very easily.
I think that may be one of the legacies from other games. I think it may have been something from from Werewolf, because I don't think I've ever heard the term fox-witted.
No.
I'm not sure that's an actual saying. I could be wrong. Internet could tell me differently, but yeah. And again, like you can come up with knowing what wits actually is. Like you read through the description there. If you can think up of your own specialty, I'm fine with you coming up with your own.
Right. Okay, you're right, because these are just suggested specialties.
Yeah.
I mean, like, does quick thinking work for you?
Quick thinking? Yeah.
Or like something like that, like,
You know what? The only thing with
kind of like combat reflexes, but it's maybe a little less combat related.
Yeah. So if you want it to be non-combat related, I'm fine, because one thing I don't want specialties to be is something that comes up every time. Like if a specialty is so broad as to apply to every roll you'll make with wits, it's not a specialty. That's just a way of describing what wits is.
Right.
Right. So if you're saying, like video game reflexes, right? Like that doesn't translate into physical reflexes, but it means that you mentally may react pretty quickly.
Right.
Like you're not gonna be able to dodge a punch really easily, but you may pick up on other less physically demanding things more quickly.
Or what about puzzle solving?
Puzzle solving is
Or intelligence?
I think it's yeah, because intelligence is processing information, retaining impressions, envision possibilities, and to think not merely outside the box, but perhaps without a box at all. You're already pretty darn smart with that. If you want to swap your creative with that, I'm fine with that.
Right. I mean, creative, though, is a good descriptor that will also help him when he's trying to invent stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that fits with that character, too. So.
Right.
Yeah, because the traits of wits is your ability to react to sudden perils, subtle clues, and twisted logic that often fills a mage's world.
What if his wits is like coming up with solutions that people aren't expecting, and it sort of fits with his hacker nature?
Yeah, like non-linear thinker or something like that.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine, because that's restricted enough to be specific circumstances for wits, but there will be ones. I guess the rule of thumb is if your descriptor, if you can't think of a time when your descriptor wouldn't apply for that attribute, then it's too broad. But that I can think of things where it wouldn't apply.
Right. Absolutely.
So, great. Okay, cool. So the next step then is to add your points to your abilities. Now, at this stage, you cannot have an ability higher than 3. You can only put 3 dots into everything, or into any given thing. Same thing, primary, secondary, tertiary, but the numbers this time are 13, 9, and 5. So 5 for your tertiary, 9 for your secondary, 13. So it'll be increments of 4 that it goes up this time. So again, if you want, you can start with add 5 to everything, and then add 4 more to 2, and then add 4 more to 1.
Right. I don't see him having a lot of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, knowledge to me, I don't know. When I look at the knowledges that are there, at least.
Yeah. So they have added a bunch of secondary abilities in both this book, and then they add a shit ton more in Bookish Secrets. But for now, I'm going to just restrict to this, because it. What I think that that expanded pool may do is just dilute the amount of points that you're spending so that you end up being hyper specialized in things like fly. Like fly is a skill in this. For in the event that you're using like a jetpack or a fly spell, or you summon a rock or to carry you or whatever,
Right.
That's going to come up in very certain circumstances, and I don't want you necessarily wasting dots or wasting points on these things that are going to be very situational, at least not at this stage. So the descriptions for those are obviously in the book. The knowledges start on page 283.
Are they just in like a weird order? Like, I don't see technology
You
on
don't
the
see
character sheet, but I see it in the book.
right. You're probably looking under secondary abilities. If you're past 289, you're into secondary abilities, so ignore those.
No, it's between. It's the last one in skills.
In skills, no, technology is listed under skills on the character sheet. Are you looking under knowledges? Remember, skills is the middle column.
Yeah, crafts, drive, etiquette, firearms, martial arts, meditation, melee, and research.
Yeah, keep scrolling down. Stealth, survival, and technology are the last three on your character sheet.
Oh, the sheet is. Oh, okay, I see. Yep, the sheet is just like shrunk down.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't the end. Okay, there we go. Aha!
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna actually start with knowledges.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I could use your system, so I'll put 5 into each and then see which ones make sense.
Yeah.
But seeing as now I have scrolled down to.
One thing I like in this too is they give the listing, and I think they've done this from the original World of Darkness games, the listing of who has these skills too, but to help you. I think that helps with your concept. So if, like they say, academics are possessed by students, scholars, scientists, journalists, authors, and wizards.
Right. Okay, he is not a.
New.
He's not an academic, so I might not even put a single point in there.
New.
Okay. Computers. Basic computing skills for your time and place. Yeah, see, like already, like student is like you can, systems and programming.
Yeah.
So like I doubt I've even done that, but I probably can use a computer. I'm probably using a computer to run my business.
Remember that some of these can reflect, like the description they give here, that's what the average, like that's how the normal person gets to it. But remember that mages are exceptional, that you could have a much higher knowledge, like a professor, level. Well, you can't start with at this stage. You'll get freebie points at the end that you'll be able to spend to raise other things. But like because it says scholar, like studying experience makes you pretty decent with essential systems. That's how the traditional person goes to that. But you may just be that level of have that level of capacity with it because of your your avatar or your arcane nature.
Right. Okay, but not that I think the computers is one that he should have.
No, you're not a member of the virtual adepts.
So what does cosmology do?
Cosmology is learning the other worlds beyond the earthly planes.
So I probably don't have any knowledge of those.
I don't think the way you described it, probably not, unless you see him. I'm trying to think of a pop culture reference, like the astral plane for Doctor Strange, but even then, his astral projection often is just he turns into a ghostly form and stays on the material plane. So D&D, I guess, has astral plane, ethereal plane, the outer planes, shit like that. But yeah, again, like that's something that's very specific. And assuming that your character's not going to take dots in the spirit sphere, it might be wasted points anyway.
Right. Okay. Well, enigmas is definitely something that I see my guy having.
Yeah, enigmas are. Yeah, it's a weird, like it's sort of like the yarn strewn between pictures that have been pinned to the wall kind of stuff. As well, right. It's picking up the secret knowledge or the secret truth of the universe through strange and obscure references or.
Gamers is one of the possessed by suggested people. So.
Yeah.
And I see my character definitely as a gamer. Let's see. esoterica. I don't know if I would have any of that.
No.
It's like New Age stuff and weird energy stuff.
Yeah, and specific knowledges like demonology, astrology, hypnosis, transhumanist theory, stuff like that. It's a skill that often comes into play for certain kinds of magic. Investigation and law, probably not. I am a little hurt that the descriptions provided under law, there's only one lawyer who's referenced at the master level. Otherwise, it's cops. Medicine, probably not. Occult.
So. Oh yeah, definitely occult. Something at least a point.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, you know who Crawley was. I mean, and they like suggested things are like RPG designers, fantasy authors. I may not necessarily be those people, but or like people who spend too much time on the internet. Those are all things that I see my character.
Totally. No, I totally agree.
And then there's politics and science.
Yeah.
Which probably not either of those. So that means I have 2 more points to put into computers, enigmas, or occult.
For science, you may want to, yeah, because he's physically crafting. It sounds like what you said is he's physically crafting some of these pop culture things. You may want to take some points in sciences anyway, because
and then I'll go to level 2 of enigmas.
Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool. You got your 5. Nice. Okay. So then, do you want to do skills or talents next?
Just want to look through them and see which one makes the more sense.
Sure.
Well, I guess I could still do 5 points in each of these and then see which. Keep following your method here.
Yeah, just do 5, and then like I find that's a really effective way to get through because you tend to fall into whatever arrangement you need, and it also helps you fly.
Theoretically increase enigmas, occult, science, and computers more. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Just because I don't have those other things.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, let's just go back to the beginning since. So.
Okay. So talents start on page 275.
275. Athletics. Oh, that's not the first one. Alertness.
This is kind of like a sixth sense type thing.
Yeah, I don't think he had a sixth sense.
No.
Art. Like literally making art.
Yeah. And that plays in for some people's kinds of magic. Like I use the optional rule for minimum ability. So depending on the way that you work magic, you may be required to have certain level of capability and certain abilities.
I'm going to put a dot there for now because some of his like contraptions and stuff might be sort of considered like artistic.
Sure. Sure. Athletics is what you think of it.
Yeah, he's probably not athletic.
Awareness is kind of like your ability to sense the unnatural, or at least the things that are beyond the accepted, consensus reality.
Right. Right. So like spotting magic.
Basically, yeah.
I'm not going to say no to awareness yet. I'm going to put a dot there just in case I don't have. other ones. Because, I mean, Brawl, probably not.
Hmm.
That's for fighters. Empathy. I mean, he might have some empathy. I mean, as a store runner, like a store owner, that might be something that he's good at.
Hmm.
So maybe. Then there's expression. That's like giving speeches and stuff.
Yeah, like it's leaving. Yeah, it says it's best used to make general impressions. So, and the suggested specialties include things like passion plays, poetic eloquence, motivational speaking, tactical rhetoric, preaching, command, shutdowns, rocking the mic. I don't think
I mean, it might be interesting. Like maybe he talks about, his pop culture theories or his, game stuff or whatever, and people in the store listen to him.
it could be also the guy who quotes at length from certain movies. If he reenacts a scene or reenacts a specific line.
Yeah. So I'll put a point in expression for now.
Okay.
I don't see him
Intimidation is.
He's not trying to.
Yeah.
Bully people.
Leadership is, more specific, commanding people.
Yeah, I doubt that.
Streetwise is, streetwise. I mean, it's knowing the sort of how things work in the low-income areas.
He might have some of that because running a gaming store, there's going to be some ne'er-do-wells coming in there. Maybe kids have tried, selling drugs out of his store or.
If you want to play it up that way, that fits with the theme. But I see that more of something that would come if he was running a bar or a restaurant or something like that.
It's not necessarily that much stuff would happen there.
No, it's not like a bar or a restaurant. You got buying liquor that fell off the back of the truck or whatever. Whereas a gaming store, like your products are all coming from presumably upstanding kind of places.
So then, he also wouldn't have subterfuge. So that leaves 1 point left to go back to art, awareness, empathy, or expression.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at that again. Expression might be a good one for like a store owner, because it also says your passions capture other people's interests. So you're passionate about a new role playing game, and people will pick it up off the shelf and buy it because of your sort of description of it.
Yeah, and if in terms of how your magic works, we haven't talked about the specific functioning of it, but if part of that is embodying pop culture ideas and stuff like that, right? Like your character wielding a lightsaber and saying to a technocratic adversary that, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Right.
That may be an act of expression to try and, accurately convey that, that reference, and then work your magics that way.
Right. Okay. So then the last one is skills. So skills are more like learned.
Yeah, they're learned and used. They're learned, but they're practical. I think that's sort of the way that they organize them. Is everything in there are things that, like as compared to knowledges are more passive in a sense that they're things that like you don't, go in a cult, you don't go in medicine. Like you make use of medicine, you make use of computers, but the skills are not as intensive of scholarship or study as much as practice. So technology obviously is going to be
Well, so craft is like definitely something I would have.
Yeah.
So put a point in craft. Drive is. No, I think he definitely doesn't. Oh, it's like driving?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Calgary is not a super pedestrian friendly city, just to give you a sense. It's very, we have roughly 1/10 of the population of the greater Toronto area, but we have the same landmass.
Right.
So it's a very, very spread out city.
Okay, well, I'm going to put one in driving to start.
Okay.
So I can at least drive. Then is etiquette. No.
Yeah, and I think those are for specifically, I mean, like there's a different cultures that they offer there, but it really, all of them really amount to like knowing the social rules and stuff like that. And that doesn't strike me as something this character would necessarily excel in. Guns. I mean, what firearms?
I think he would know lots about firearms.
Okay.
From his video games.
Sure.
I'm going to start by putting 1 dot in there just because I'm going to go back and level these after.
Okay.
Martial arts, probably nothing.
Okay. Meditation.
Meditation, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I don't know if that doesn't strike me as...
Really bad.
No. Melee.
No, because I think to be a melee fighter, you would actually have had to, like you said, used it and trained in it. And I don't see my guy going to karate or ninjutsu or anything like that.
Yeah. What about research? Searching down sources of information like public libraries, private archives, stuff like that, internet searches, occult collections, verbal lore, and so forth.
I mean, I can see him using it. You know, if he's playing role-playing games, if he's finding, you know, stuff that he wants to bring into the store, I think research is something he would do.
Sure. And I think that it's also one of the, if he's quite computer conversant, it's one of the skills that sort of goes with that. You know, the people joke about their Google foo, but I mean, like that's learning how to do Boolean searches effectively is, you know, it's a pretty useful skill, and that's what's reflected by research.
Yeah. I don't see much stealth.
No.
Survival. No, that's like literal survival.
Yeah.
And then technology.
Yeah, which is operations and repairs of technology.
Again, it's an inventor's thing, so.
Yeah, for sure.
So probably yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so that puts you at 5 points in each of the things. So then which 2 do you want to add 4 more dots?
Let's see. Art, empathy, and expression. Awareness. I mean, I definitely think I need to improve my skills.
Okay.
Because both crafting and technology mentioned inventing.
Yeah.
The knowledges kind of fit with the video game part of his character. I don't necessarily know that he needs more talents.
Okay.
So let's go with, yeah, I think it'll probably be knowledges will be the secondary one, and skills will probably be his main one then.
Okay. So go ahead and add 4 to knowledges then, and add 8 to skills. And remember, nothing can be higher than 3 to start.
Right. So 4 points in knowledges. Well, let's put the 3rd point in enigmas.
Okay.
Oh, and then it could be one more in each
Mm-hmm.
of the ones that I have.
Computer, occult, and science.
What does the occult one say if you're level 2?
Occult at level 2 is student. Some of the stuff you've heard or read is actually true.
Which might kind of fit.
Hmm?
If he sort of like started to become part of this magic world. Yeah, let's put them all at 2.
Okay.
So it's the same thing as the other one. Once you get 4 dots, you would get the special thing?
Yeah, and you'll have an opportunity to raise things to 4 dots in the freebie points stage.
Okay, I see. So then I just need to do 8 dots in
your skills.
All right, technology.
And I'm going to read ahead. Oh, next week, backgrounds. Interesting. And while you're doing that, I'm going to quickly refer to, I can't remember how many instruments you have to pick for it, but there is, one thing I'm going to do is at one of the rules as written is that you can use, so the skill or the trait that you use to cast magic, to work your well on the world is arete, which is right underneath advantages. Your arete starts at 1. Arete is a Greek word that means like excellence or greatness or I don't know, like not godliness, but it's something like that. Like it's a level of almost like platonic ideal of exertion or of exercise, I guess, of some action. So but anyway, arete, you can buy that up in with your freebie points up to 3, and then the amount of points that you have in arete tells you how many points in your spheres you can have. So you can't have any points in spheres higher than your arete. In the rules as written, once you hit arete 3, you get to start dropping some of your instruments. But I don't like that because I want starting characters to have to use their magic, like use their instruments to be able to work their magic. And then as you play, you gain arete, you start being able to drop those things as you learn the truth of reality, which is that reality is what you choose to make it. You don't need, you're casting aside your crutches and whatever else, but you can still use them and gain a bonus to your skills. So does that make sense as to why I want to do it that way?
Okay. So, okay. I think so.
Okay. So
I get it. I actually see my character as someone who isn't necessarily into dropping his stuff.
No, the technocratic. I need to double check this, but I think the technocratic characters, like anyone from the technocracy, the Sons of Ether, the virtual adepts, they don't get the benefit. They start losing their instruments later than anyone else because their instruments are so closely attuned to the way reality actually works. There's sort of like a slight spin on it that it's harder for them to give up those crutches.
I distributed all my points.
Did you? Okay, great. Then
crafts at 3, drive at 2, firearms at 3, research at 2, and technology at 3.
Okay. So next thing is, do you want to spend your background points, or you want to talk about how you cast, like your focus, which is how you work your magic?
We could do. What's the normal next step?
Well, that's the next. If we're going down the list of things here in character creation process, step 4 is select advantages, which is choose backgrounds, and then define your focus.
Okay,
so if you want to do it in the strict order, then we go next to backgrounds. So you have 7 points to spend on backgrounds. And the backgrounds start on page 301.
301.
There is a summary of them on page 252. which may help narrow that search because there are a lot of options.
Yeah, let's go to 252, and maybe you can help me with these a little.
Sure. These, no, I may need to refer to the actual things because there's a lot more options in this than there was the last time I ran this game.
So wait, how many of these do I have?
You have 7 points to spend.
Oh, and they go up in points just like the other things.
That's right, yeah.
Wow.
So some of the really useful ones, your avatar is a useful one mechanically because it allows you to store quintessence, which you can spend to, it's like the raw stuff of the universe. You can spend that to reduce difficulty of working magic. Arcane / cloaking is a really cool one because it basically is your avatar warping reality to make you more subtle. You know, it's depending on your level of arcane or cloaking. And the reason it's split that way is because it depends on whether you are a tradition mage or a technocracy, or rather whether you're part of the technocracy or any other kind of mage. Same thing, like you'll see Sanctum is Sanctum / laboratory. That's because, again, like technomancers would probably call them laboratories or cloaking, whereas tradition mages would call them their sanctum or their arcane. Let's see here. So the way you allies may be something to look into because your character may have some connections in the community. Blessings, I don't know what that does.
Okay, so the ones I see, I mean, right away, so there's a few ones called, so what's a chantry or a construct?
That is a specific stronghold. You've got a place where you can build, basically you add points in and then you spend those points on other backgrounds that are reflective of your chantry. Now your chantry, I don't think that's a good one here because you're kind of, from the way you described him, acting on your own at the start of our chronicle. He's not part of necessarily not part of a bunch of, like, that would be a good one where you would pool, like some of your backgrounds, you can pool them. So everyone, let's say everyone kicks in 2 points to it, and we're playing in a 5-player game. That gives you 10 points to build a chantry, which you all can access and all can make use of those resources.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
So then another one is resources.
It's your cash.
Well, and properties. So I don't know if I should put something in there just to represent the store that I own.
Let's see here. Resources are, yeah, I mean, you could, because I mean, if the story is going to come into play in terms of like a resource you can draw on, then I would put points in there. Yeah. You know, like if we're going to say that, well, you know, I'm taking there's some major expenditure you need to make, and you're going to say, well, I'll take a second mortgage on the property, or whatever, you know, then that's the way that that would be those points, you know, coming into play in the actual game.
Right, like if I needed money.
Yeah.
So I should maybe put at least 1 point in there just to be fair with the background we've created.
You might want to put more. Like if you're middle class with property, you own or have a decent equity in some property, plus a vehicle, investments, and savings. You could maintain a 1-dot standard of living indefinitely. Standard of living means a small apartment and perhaps a cheap vehicle.
Oh, wait, starting on page 301, I can see the actual, it'll explain what the dots do, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm looking around. The resources is at 322.
Yeah, here, let's see here. Okay, so slightly ahead of the game, small apartment. Yeah, probably I should spend 3 dots on it to make it realistic. So I think that makes the most sense. Basically, he can survive on a 1-dot income indefinitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, which probably makes sense. I mean, own a large house and some property and 2 vehicles and like all that sounds a little too high.
Yeah.
Yeah. By local standards, you're a millionaire. Like that would make me quite rich in Calgary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the land of new wealth, so.
Well, yeah, but still.
Yeah. But yeah, but no. But your character's not a millionaire, right? So.
Right, that's what I'm saying. There's even in a rich city, there's not that many millionaires.
Yeah.
You know. Okay, so let's go with 3 points. Now, another one that sounded interesting was the Sanctum.
Sanctum, yes.
Or Laboratory, which I don't know if it makes sense that the store could also be that same place, but.
Let's see here. So what it does is it provides you a private space to conduct experiments, meditate, practice your arts, and so on. A stock of materials you can use, like herbs, cauldrons, diagrams, elaborate glyphs, blah, blah, blah. Has a specially prepared ritual space. It reduces the difficulty of rituals or experiments performed in the area. There's a cloaking effect that safeguards the place's location. All effects that are cast within the sanctum are considered coincidental effects, so coincidental magic, so long as those effects follow the definition of the reality within the sanctum. The effects of rival mages are considered vulgar in your space.
So these are options you could choose one of?
These are all the benefits you get from it. Yeah. And Mystic Sanctums have an additional benefit over technological laboratories. The Gauntlet rating, which is the difficulty to reach the Umbra, like the outer planes or the astral plane kind of, is reduced by 1. Whereas technomagical laboratories are 1 higher than otherwise. So because of these many benefits, a Sanctum costs 2 background dots for each dot in Sanctum. It offers an unusual amount of value per dot. So let's see here. So if I think you got 4 dots left, it would effectively give you a small stock of goods. Ritual difficulties would be reduced by 1, and 2 dots in arcane for keeping it cloaked from people trying to find it.
So that is definitely an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a huge amount of benefits, because I foresee a lot of your magic is likely going to be ritual based. It's not going to mean like you burn incense and shit like that. It just in the sense that it takes you time to complete the rite and then complete your magic, right? Because your character doesn't strike me as the kind who like you're going to need to build this shit, right? Like you need to build things to work. And I think that is that would be closer to the way ritual magic works in the rules, rather than just spontaneous casting.
Right.
So that would be helpful.
I mean, it means that I can't take any other things.
It means you can't take them right now. It's optional to allow to spend points or experience points to buy backgrounds. But like, if you don't want to start with a Sanctum too, if there's other things that you want to, you want to spend those points on, you can do that.
Right.
Like if there's other ones, yeah, you could spend those there and then buy the Sanctum later. But I mean, but the way that you describe the character, it does sound like that's a pretty good fit for it as well.
Yeah, it totally is. The only thing is I was thinking that it would be good to put some point into having employees and not have to run the whole store.
I am going to. So you mean like to get for retainers?
Yeah, because aren't they like? Wait, what page had the like descriptor of all of them?
321. Retainers are on 323. So the retainers are more like each retainer is a devoted servant, employee, mind-controlled servitor, lab-built construct, or even a very minor spirit who does your bidding. He'll tend your house, your gear, and your overall busy work. Perhaps he's a pathetic lab assistant, a mundane apprentice, a lover, or a devoted friend. He's your Igor. She's your moneypenny. So long as you treat characters with respect, the background gives you an extra set of hands. So if you've got like, you know, some employees who will regularly be like someone you'll rely on in the story, you know, or be able to do things for you, like kind of like your Scoobies to that were for Buffy in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Well, I just imagine like that there's going to be like stuff that's going to happen in the game.
Yep.
And I don't know if you want me to spend points on that to say that I don't like close the store every time I leave, or like I don't know if you consider that's up to you. I don't know.
I think that your resources will, if it's just to maintain, like you're not going to lose the store or lose access to your resources because you don't have employees. The retainers are, if they are characters that they're plain Jane, you know, normal humans who you may be able to draw on in the course of the story.
Right.
That's where you would spend points on retainers. If they are exceptional people with exceptional skills, that's where they would be more allies. If they are unnatural things like I don't know, like Clockwork Owl from you know, Clash of the Titans, that would probably be a familiar, not a retainer or an ally.
Right.
So yeah, so what do you think? Do you think that they would actually come into play, or are they just background folks?
I think they both are interesting options.
Yeah. You know, we don't need to wrap this up today either. Like we can continue talking about this between, because we still have your focus to consider. And maybe what I'll do is I'll assign some homework between now and next week for you to take a look at the rules for determining your focus, because that will be a very personal thing, and I'll want that to come from you.
Like, what is the focus? That's like your spellcasting object?
That's the way that you work magic, yeah. So the way that you determine that is through a combination of your paradigm, your practice, and your instruments. Your paradigm is what you believe. Your practice is how you work that magic, and your instruments are what you use in the course of doing your practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of? Okay. So
I'll have to take a look at it.
Yeah, like once you see some examples, that will be probably easier. But if you look at 565. Hold on.
I'm going to go with the Sanctum Laboratory idea.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I think it's cool to make the store a bit of a central part of the game.
I totally agree.
Because I think it was cool that you have such a cool game store. Like, it's a good idea. It fits the character well. So
yeah.
The people that work there can just be kids that I hire. They don't have to be special. If I choose to invest points later to make one of them an actual retainer, that could be interesting.
Yep. Okay, so what I'm going to do is in the last minutes here, let's go to page 566, and I'll just talk a little bit about focus, and then we'll maybe leave the session there, and we'll talk about we'll finish this character up, either correspondence over the weekend, or we can just do it in the next session and finish this guy up, and that will give me some time to come up with a prelude idea as well. So the last things we'll need to do is spend your freebie points and then determine this stuff. Let's see here. Is that correct? Let me make sure.
Well, and then there's what, the spheres? You do that after you finish the advantages?
Yeah, because I think that your yes, it is, and because you need to have your you need to have an idea of how you work magic first. So if you look on page 566, this lists common paradigms, practices, and instruments. So and it lists there again kind of what I was trying to say, that how your focus works. Your focus is all of those three components together. What do you believe? That's your paradigm. That's the way that you view the world and the working of magic. So how does the mage turn belief into action? That is your practice. And then does the mage use in that practice? Those are your instruments. So for instance, the paradigms they give here are things like a mechanical cosmos, and they give really good descriptions of each of these as well. That's your view of the world as a complex set of moving parts, right? Like there are interconnected parts to the entire universe. A world of gods and monsters. You believe that there are things lurking beyond the knowledge of the common person. There are spirits or daemons or whatever that are behind all the workings of the world. Everything is data. It's all good. Have faith. That belief in a god or something like that is the thing that drives the reality. Those are the things those philosophical beliefs and understandings, that's what sets the tone, I guess, for your focus. It's the paradigm. It's how you view things. You then look at your practices. So let's say that your character will take mechanical cosmos as a starting point. Not because I think it's necessarily the best one, just because I think it provides a framework to understand this. So what mechanistic cosmos says is that creation is essentially a machine. By understanding it, we can elevate ourselves to a superior state. All things possess an intrinsic sense of order, and chaos is an illusion that conceals a deeper form of symmetry. The divine watchmaker concept from enlightened deism, certain forms of Gnosticism, and the postmodern concept of reality hacking all stem from this image of a systematic and comprehensible cosmos. Maybe for your character, you also would throw in ideas like memes or pop culture tropes as being something that, like, the idea of like the hero's journey and whatever, and the commonalities that can be seen in a lot of global storytelling across the globe. Those are things that you could your character might see as representations of that. The practices are how you actually do that. So with that in mind, so the shape of focus, let's say weird science, I think is probably going to be yours.
Or maybe reality hacking.
Yeah. I'm just going to throw because I turned to weird science. Weird science, by definition, defies the bounds of possibility. Its crazy ideas fuel crazy creativity. Theories that no rational science would entertain guide the creation of devices and creatures whose very existence violates the consensus. Jetpacks, death rays, quirky robots, outlandish vehicles, Atlantean sonic technologies, spacecraft, mechanical appendages, psychic enhancement gear, lab-grown allies, devastating war machines, and whatever strange gadgetry the mad scientist can imagine. As with other tech-based practices, weird science requires serious work in a lab before results appear. An enlightened scientist might spend months or years honing his creation before revealing it to the world. Yet once that innovation has been achieved, he can often replicate it quickly, often with the help of skilled, if dispirited, minions. Weird science also allows the scientist to alter tech with sudden bursts of inspiration, MacGyvering rickety inventions that last just long enough to accomplish a single task. And so, because he's no sort of wizard, you imbecile, the mad scientist needs tools and materials close at hand in order to work his wonders. True science is indeed miraculous, but it's not some kind of magic. No, not at all. So common instruments that would go with that would be things like armor, books, bones and remains, brains or computer interface, celestial alignments, computers and IT gear, devices and machines, elements, gadgets, inventions, laboratories, languages, numbers and numerology, toys, vehicles, weapons, writing, and inscriptions. So then what you would do is look to your instruments, and your character needs to pick, hold on, I can't remember how many it is. there's a certain number of instruments you need, and you don't necessarily need to have them keyed to specific spheres. It's just that when you cast magic, you need to incorporate some of them. Let's see here. Oop. Character creation. Where is it? No fewer than 7 associated instruments. So you'll need to pick 7 instruments from that. And the instruments are listed in from page 588 through to, oof, there's lots. Like
wait, how many of those do you pick?
7.
Oh, so you picked 1 paradigm?
1 paradigm, 1 practice, and then 7 instruments.
Okay. Okay, I know some of them that I'll take, so.
Okay, cool. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I'm going to take the everything is data paradigm.
Okay. So how does that one work?
So it's kind of like the computer code version of the first one that you were saying, the mechanistic world or whatever, but
yep.
It's actually like, you believe that you're basically living in a computer simulation or God's code or whatever, depends on what version of it you believe.
Okay.
And I think that my character probably just believes that he's living in some kind of a computer game or simulation.
Okay, that's cool. Okay. So that will inform what practice you use, and then the instruments that are used to support that. The reason it's important to know these things is because that's how we describe your magic that's how we define what you can and cannot do with your magic. Right.
Right.
Like, because the descriptors or the rules for the magic itself is fairly bland in the sense that it's not specific to certain kinds of, like, there's not a rule for a fireball from an Order of Hermes mage, and then a rule for a heat ray gun from a Son of Ether or a Society of Ether character. What there is rules for how you use forces and prime to create an effect that is like a fireball, and then it is up to use the focus to figure out how your character would manifest that. So, for instance, your character, let's set aside the fact that we don't know what your spheres are yet, but let's say you wanted to manifest something like that. How do you think he would do that? Like, would it require, because his practice is probably going to be some kind of science-related thing. I assume that it would require some kind of laboratory work or something that you crafted in laboratory, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm imagining.
Yeah.
Like I said, I imagine that he creates gadgets or whatever that he uses to cast his spells or whatever, or do whatever magic he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So it could be like, I'm trying to think what a heat ray would be. If he really wants to reach, so if you wanted to make something like that, maybe what he's going to cobble together is a replica of the heat ray from the old War of the Worlds film.
Right, exactly.
It makes the weird, like, beep, 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 kind of, screaming sound. So we would make it would be a ritual magic, and we would make a bunch of rolls to try and accrue the successes to craft that thing. And then when you used it, we would be making, because you have to carry that thing around with you, you would be making rolls to have it, to have the actual magical effect go off.
Right.
And then it would depend on whether, to give you an example of the difference between coincidental and vulgar magic, if you mounted that on the back of your vehicle, and then you were driving around in the middle of the daytime, and you used that in front of a bunch of people to blow up a police car, that's vulgar magic, because ray guns don't exist in our world. You can make them exist because you're a mage, but because the reality, like the consensus reality, doesn't accept that, it's vulgar magic. However, if you dress it up as coincidental magic by, let's see here, well, how would you do that? Maybe like flicking a match or something like that. And actually, I don't know how you'd make that to coincidental. It's tricky with some of the, what do you call it? No. Okay, here's how you would make it coincidental. If the vehicle is near a food cart, you could say that a stray spark or something from the food truck would fly out and hit some pooled gasoline or a stream of gasoline underneath it. You would still need your instrument to do that, but you would be couching it in terms of coincidental magic. That's a really shitty example of it. And I think what I'll do is I have some homework too, is I will bone up on the actual casting rules so we can be clear. You'll be clear. You'll be making the decisions for what you want to, have as your instruments and whatever else. While with full awareness of what it will mean at the table.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. Well, that if you want to skip ahead to, you can look on that cheat sheet on page, whatever the heck it was, page 250. The last things you're going to pick. You're going to pick your spheres after you do your focus. You're going to pick your spheres. So you could read ahead and see what those, what the spheres do. And remember, your spheres are restricted to the ranks you have in Arete. And one of the points of your spheres will go into your affinity sphere, which I think for you is matter. And then you're going to spend your freebie points. Now, if you know you're going to spend freebie points to buy up your Arete to 2 or to 3, then feel free to spend the points in your spheres. It's just you can't start the game with spheres higher than your Arete.
Right.
But you can buy them up if you intend to have like a couple spheres at 2. Generally speaking, the spheres go 1 dot is perception, and then 2 dot begins to like change existing things. 3 is making significant change to existing things, and I think that you need points in prime in order to fuel new patterns. So like if you're creating something out of a whole cloth, like the fireball, for instance, fireball is a pretty hard thing to do because it incorporates both simple and complex forces. It has both heat and fire as well as kinetic properties to it. And you're creating a new pattern. So you do require, it requires you to have some skill in prime in order to fuel that thing.
Right, okay.
But I'll let you read through. Like the descriptions are pretty quick to get through, so it doesn't take you forever to go through them. The way you're describing your character, I imagine that your points are likely going to be spent on matter, on prime, possibly on correspondence at low levels, and forces. Those are likely the ones to sort of look at. Because matter is really the one that involves creating matter, or transforming matter. And then the ones like time, spirit, mind, those may not, but I'll leave it to you to determine whether or not you need to put points in those too. Depending on, I guess it also depends on what you see, like what magics he uses this pop culture thing to produce, right?
Right.
So, awesome. All right, so that is our quitting time. Once again, next week I will not chew up, half an hour just talking about gaming shit because I don't foresee me getting any new games between now and then. But I wanted to share that new cool shit with you. Cool. So for those listening at home, thanks so much for joining us for this second. This is now 4 hours of character creation we've gone through for this. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions in relation to our Mage campaign, please feel free to leave a posting Otherwise, or leave a comment in the section below, and I will endeavor to reply in a timely fashion. Otherwise, we will see you again in 2 weeks' time to complete character creation for this character and maybe get started on a prelude to kind of set up the world and talk about some of the other people in who occupy it, who Jeff's character has encountered thus far. So anyway, we'll see you then, and thanks again for watching.